Our next speaker is Diego Juffe. He worked on the Red List for quite a long time and has also been involved with other knowledge products of IUCN. He now works for WCMC and he's actually the lead author on Protected Planet. And because of his experience with these different knowledge products, he has an idea of the costs associated with them. And he's going to talk to us about the implications of our future plans, our future strategies and targets, and the costs associated with them when we consider the knowledge products that we will need. Diego.
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting me to this talk. So in the past weeks or days we have been discussing all these figures about coverage of protected areas, and all these figures come obviously from the World Database on Protected Areas, which is a knowledge product. We've been discussing that coverage is not enough, that to protect all species and all ecosystems we probably will need more than 10% and 17%, and again the Red List of threatened species and key biodiversity areas are essential databases to find out answers to these problems. And now we're discussing how much space is enough for nature, and we will again will have to use some of these products that are out there to respond to these questions. So last year we started a study that looked into what was the cost of producing, maintaining and updating 4 knowledge products that are widely used in conservation to track progress towards targets. And these are the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, the Protected Planet Initiative, which includes the World Database on Protected Areas, Key Biodiversity Areas, and Red List of Ecosystems. These are very different processes that are in different stages of development, as you can see here, but especially the first two, the Red List of Threatened Species and the World Database on Protected Areas, are very important to track progress towards current targets that we have. So in the study, we recognized that the knowledge products were different and they covered different processes, from gathering data in the field to doing publications and producing indicators to monitor progress. And here you can see how these knowledge products cover in different phases. We weren't able to look at the costs of everything, so there are some costs that were not included in the study. So we didn't include the costs of designating and delineating protected areas, which are obviously quite high. We didn't assess the cost of networks that support data collection and monitoring, like the SSC network or the IBA network. We only looked at global databases, so we didn't look at the cost of producing national red lists. And the Red List of Ecosystems is under development, so you can see there that the orange bar has some gaps. That's because those parts are still in development and we weren't able to cost them. And we didn't assess the cost of voluntary time, but we did measure voluntary time in number of days. So what we did is we interviewed a lot of people that work and manage these databases, and we asked them the cost of their processes, and we divided the cost into 3 sections. First, we looked at high categories, then as subcategories, and then we allocated funding sources for each of those costs. So, for example, for data development, we tried to assess the cost invested on personnel, on infrastructure, on workshops, on publications, and for each of them, we look at where the money comes from. And then we converted all the costs to US dollars 2014. And as I said before, we only collected volunteer time a number of days. So what the database that we got includes 38,579 species, so it's 16.62% of the database. We managed to collect the costs of producing and maintaining the database on protected areas. We looked at the costs of almost all key biodiversity areas stored in the World Birds and Biodiversity Database managed by BirdLife International. And we also looked at the costs to date invested on the Red List of Ecosystems. And because we didn't assess the cost of 100% of the data sets, we extrapolated to 100% in the cases that we didn't have the 100% of all the costs, like in the red list of threatened species. So the first preliminary results of how much has been invested to date in this foreknowledge product, it came out at minimum of 103 million US dollars and 114 million US dollars. But the interesting thing is between 97 and 111 years of volunteer time has been invested to date in developing, producing and maintaining these foreknowledge products. And if we compare this to other data compilation, data management processes, it's quite low. For example, I looked at the Landsat design, launch and data management, 1 billion US dollars. The US census of 2010 was 13 billion US dollars, and the cost of maintaining and putting an infrastructure for the global observatory system or the UNFCCC, it's between 5 and 7 billion per year. So more details about this study. Where did the money come from in these past years? So as you can see, most of the money invested in these foreknowledge products came from philanthropy for individuals, 11% from IGOs such as UNEP, NGOs 10%, and we also looked at IUCN core money, but from the core budget of IUCN, multilateral dollars and private sector. In terms of numbers, we looked in each knowledge product also where the money comes from. You can see, for example, that key biodiversity areas have invested a lot in the past years, and most of it comes from philanthropy. And you can see in the Protected Planet, the World Database on Protected Areas, which is managed by UNEP WCMC, a big chunk of the money has come from IG, intergovernmental organizations, and also from the private sector. And if we look at where was the money put in, it's quite consistent to see that most of the money was invested in personnel, and this raises the importance of that we need people to generate data. Infrastructure, it's less, we invest less in infrastructure and travel workshops and publications, but we need people to collect data, and we need structures, and we need to communicate the results. And then I looked into the annual costs of each knowledge product, and we didn't look at the annual cost of the red list of ecosystems because it's in development. It's not possible to assess right now what is the annual cost, but you could see here the IUCN red list of threatened species is obviously a huge operation which involves assessing thousands and thousands of species and involving lots of experts. So it's, as I say, these knowledge products are very different one to each other, and they're not comparable because of this different way of approaching them. And what we're going to do next with this database is we're going to assess the cost of reaching what we call comprehensive baselines by 2020. And then we're going to publish the results of this study when we finish it. So for example, we've been thinking that for the red list of threatened species, there was a paper called the Barometer of Life, which said that we need to assess around 160,000 species in the red list to be able to have a good indicator. So we will assess the cost of reaching that goal. For the Protected Planet, which includes the World Database on Protected Areas, we were thinking that we should assess the cost and how much we need to fulfill the Protected Planet strategy. For KVAs, the identification of KVAs to cover taxonomic groups and biomes, and for the red list of ecosystems, what is the cost to achieve a global red list of ecosystems by 2020. So my conclusions is that if we are to think about how much is enough, if we need 50% of whatever target we set or whatever we do, we need data, and without data we cannot take any decisions. And data generation needs people, needs structures, processes, and this costs money. So we need to understand how much money we need and how we are going to, which databases, which data generation processes we're going to choose to track our targets. And finally, the generation of biodiversity information through knowledge products is affordable, and it offers a good value for money if we compare it to other processes. And finally, I'd like to thank who has been paying this work, the formal advisory group that has been helping me to figure out these things, and all the people who provided it. Thank you.